Well, Apple finished dub for 2022 and, as per usual, pulled a lot of surprises. Got a lot of the leaks wrong, but we got some of them right. There's a lot of truth to sift through the lies, but overall the good news is we did get hardware, but it probably wasn't the hardware a lot of you were expecting. Let's begin. So the hardware we didn't get was Mac Pro. Yes, despite what a lot of you claim, just because John in the last Apple keynote said we're gonna save the Mac Pro for another day, that did not mean it had to come out this month. And also, yes, Apple doesn't necessarily have to launch the Mac Pro at dub, but we did get a refresh to the MacBook Air. Quite a bit different from what a lot of the leakers were claiming though. Those last minute rumors ended up being correct from Gurman and Kuo, with more traditional color options plus one new blue tier, but they call it a midnight color and it's beautiful. It's very black, but it has this light shade of blue, and the MacBook Air has now ditched the wedge design. It's still very thin and very lightweight, but it's rocking MagSafe, which I'm not a huge fan of, but I was more interested in how the MagSafe colors match with the MacBook design. I still consider it a port upgrade though, because it now means you can power the whole laptop and still have two vacant Thunderbolt ports, whereas before, one of those Thunderbolt ports had to be for power. They did give it a notch, just like its bigger brothers, and thinner bezels around the board. Full-size function keys. May I just say, I'm in love with this design. I'm so thankful that we got black bezels on these things. Once again, the 24-inch iMac can remain the only Mac with white bezels. Hopefully we kill that off soon in the future as well. And because of the shutdowns and supply chain shortages, this isn't going to be available until next month, but it starts with the brand new M2 chip. So yeah, before the Apple Silicon transition is finally complete, they're already introducing M2. We still have a Mac Pro left, and spoiler alert, they're probably not going to launch the Mac Pro at the iPhone event, so we may have to wait till October or November before completing this Apple Silicon transition. So this was a bit trippy and not really something we expected, but Apple also introduced like dual USB-C options on the power adapter that comes with the MacBook Air, which I'm a little jealous of. I would have opted for that if it was available when I bought my MacBook Pro. Hopefully it becomes available for sale later in the year, but you can still buy a binned M1 MacBook Air for $1,000. The M2 MacBook Air is now starting at $1,200, which accommodate for inflation. It kind of makes sense for prices to be going up. But for that price hike, you are getting a larger display than before. It's a little bit bigger. You're getting better speakers, better microphones, better port options, a thinner design, and up to 24 gigs of RAM now, which is incredible. So we haven't gotten hardware at dub for 2 years, so I'm very grateful we finally got some today. Looking forward to testing that out once it officially launches. Again, can't wait to see that midnight color in person. It looks wonderful. But simultaneously, the weird part is they actually refreshed the 13-inch MacBook Pro as well with the Touch Bar, but they did nothing with it except they threw in the M2 chip, which was actually rumored to be at the March event earlier in the year. That didn't end up happening until now, but essentially it's the same price, same exact laptop, just with the M2 chip. I really did not expect the Touch Bar to make it another upgrade, but here it is, M2 living on with the Touch Bar and everything. If you're a diehard fan of the Touch Bar, then I guess that's a decent option, but otherwise, I think the M2 MacBook Air is absolutely the better buy. Even if the 13-inch MacBook Pro technically has slightly better battery life or something, it's just such a dated design. I don't think it's worth the money considering how good the MacBook Air is now. I mean, it has fast charging support, which it didn't have before. 50% in 30 minutes, that's great. And even the binned M2 should show improvements over a non-binned M1. Very grateful to finally get some answers on this redesigned MacBook Air. Of course, it's fanless, very efficient, same battery life as before, and that pretty much covers all of the hardware changes that were announced. Let's get into what this event was really for, and that, of course, is software. There's so many new changes and little details we could get hung up on, so just for the sake of this recap, I'm just going to be highlighting what I think are the biggest changes across the board. I'm absolutely not going into detail on every single one. I'm just kind of gonna skim the surface, which is iOS 16 surpassed my expectations. I had been hearing requests and seeing concept art for lock screens on iPhones for years, and I kept thinking, oh, that concept looks cool, but I shouldn't get my hopes up because Apple's not going to change the lock screen. Finally, it seems like they're adding a ton of customization options now between the font, letting you have wallpapers that kind of start to cover up the time. They've redesigned notifications to be more elegant and orderly, so they kind of show up at the bottom of the phone and you just kind of swipe up to show the rest. They give you a lot of different control over widgets and little icons that can be on the front screen. Definitely kind of points to the idea of there maybe being an always-on display on the iPhone 14 now that they're giving you these kinds of time and widget features that could be baked in there. I can't wait to start messing around with it on my devices, and yes, I'll dive into how I want to spec out iOS 16 on my phone once the beta finishes installing. And as far as noticeable OS changes go, I think that iOS 16 will be quite obvious, considering literally the first moment the screen turns on, you'll be able to tell, oh yeah, this phone is running iOS 16. They also brought some cool changes to messages, like you can now edit texts or unsend them. I hope that there is a log file that's recorded, because I would hate it if you texted someone something and then like tried to gaslight them by deleting the text and they didn't know what you did. Hopefully there's a way to find deleted messages or see the original text before it was edited, but that's going to be a huge help to me because of all the typos I keep sending. And they're introducing this new iCloud family shared photo library thing where essentially like all of your friends and family can have a shared library that iOS will automatically arrange those pictures, put them into albums based on where the pictures were taken and who's in the pictures using facial recognition. Even an option directly in the camera app to like turn it on and say that every picture you take will just show up in this album. In theory, it sounds helpful because you don't want to have to airdrop all your pictures between everyone's family stuff, but honestly, it sounds fairly complex to set up, and I doubt that many people will actually do it. But if Apple finds a simple and intuitive way to set it up so that everyone understands how it works, that would be great and very effective. I just have a feeling that a lot of people are going to be concerned about pictures automatically showing up in other people's libraries, like automatically, and they don't want things accidentally being loaded in there. Could be really embarrassing if you're taking all kinds of meme screenshots and that kind of thing, and it starts showing up in places it's not supposed to. But probably the biggest shock of iOS 16 is how few devices are actually supported for it. Contrary to what I thought, the iPhone 7 is not getting iOS 16. Basically, the oldest iPhone that will be running iOS 16 is the iPhone 8 from 2017. So yeah, the iPhone 7 still got 6 years of software support, which is not bad, but probably a big bummer to all of you iPhone 7 and 6S fans out there. This was also the moment that Apple discontinued support for all iPhones with headphone jacks. Little detail we got glossed over there. But another minor note that Apple didn't talk about during the keynote but is listed on the website is with iOS 16, Face ID will now work in landscape mode on select iPhone models. Not sure which iPhone models yet, but I've been asking for Face ID to work in landscape mode for years. I thought it was a hardware limitation, but I guess it apparently works now. I can't wait to test that and try it out. But they should have talked about that on stage. It's absolutely worth going into. Last little detail I'll discuss on iOS 16, which I thought was weird, is Apple Pay Later. So we have Apple Pay Cash, which is basically just a little debit card. We have the Apple Card, which is an official credit card powered by Goldman Sachs using the MasterCard network. So it's a full-on credit card. You can use it physically or digitally. You get the cash back with Apple Pay. But now they're introducing Apple Pay Later, which is not a credit card technically, but essentially allows you to pay for things in 4 installments over the course of 6 weeks when using Apple Pay. So it's not a physical card, but it lets people pay for things slowly over time with no interest and no fees. There's no cash back either. So it's just one of those things that Apple is trying to convince everyone to use Apple Pay for, because you can pay for it slowly over time with 0% APR, which may be tempting to some, but the fact that it's over the course of 6 weeks makes me feel like it's kind of trying to encourage people to spend more than they have and start living more paycheck to paycheck. So I wouldn't recommend using Apple Pay Later, but I see why Apple wants to offer it. It's basically just another incentive to increase Apple Pay adoption. If you find out, hey, pay with Apple Pay and you can pay for this more slowly over time, maybe some people will be interested in that. It just kind of depends on their financial situation, but very interesting concept. But PayPal and other companies have offered this before, but a lot of people use Apple Pay at the end of the day, so I imagine this will likely be a pretty popular option. Let's talk about watchOS 9 for a second. This was probably one of the most minor upgrades I've ever seen. They introduced like 4 new watch faces, which are pretty cool, and a new app for managing medications, but that's also on iOS, so it's not even really a watchOS exclusive thing. Basically, you can put in prescriptions and reminders for other people or yourself to know when to take certain medication, which is is okay, just kind of a refined version of the Reminders app. And they are also expanding on different workout options. So like running can track more accurately your wrist motions and compare it to how you've run in the past. It was kind of real nitty-gritty stuff. As far as WatchOS upgrades go, I feel like there's usually like one big change or one big refresh, and this one didn't really seem to have much of that big update or big refresh, aside from notifications when the display is already on seem to be a lot more cleaner. Like instead of the notification jumping up and covering the entire display, more similar to your iPhone, it just kind of slowly drops in. I liked how it looked, and it looks clean, but everything feels pretty minor here. But I don't really mind too much because I already think that WatchOS is great, and there's really not that many new things they can do. I was really hoping for a low power mode, and that leak ended up being wrong, and I was really hoping to get third-party watch faces, but I've been asking for that since the beginning. We still don't have it. Probably should just give up hope on that one, but probably the biggest update to WatchOS 9 is who isn't getting it. Thank God, finally, based on request, Apple has killed support for the Apple Watch Series 3, but here's the weird thing. They're still selling the Series 3. To my knowledge, I don't think Apple has ever done this, where they've literally announced that a certain product will not be getting a future software update that is coming later this year, like just in the fall, and yet they are still selling that product. You know, like they just discontinued support for the iPhone 7, and spoiler alert, they're discontinuing the iPad Air 2 and the iPad Mini 4, but those devices haven't been sold by Apple for many, many years. Even the iPad Air 3, which they haven't sold for 3 years, is still getting the latest iPadOS. But Apple Watch Series 3 from 2017 still being sold for $200, and we now have confirmation it won't run WatchOS 9. Really weird that they would be selling a product now saying it's not going to get updates for much longer. So once again, I just have to keep reminding you, don't buy the Series 3. It's not worth it. I mean, while WatchOS 9 is minor, get the Apple Watch SE. You can find them on sale. You can find them refurbished for cheaper. Series 3, not worth it. Don't do it. Now, in regards to macOS, the new name is Ventura, and there's a lot of minor changes here, but one in particular that I'm very excited for. If you've watched my channel for a while, you know I've been asking for this for years, and that feature is continuity camera, which means you can basically turn your rear-facing iPhone camera into the webcam for your Mac. And they basically implemented this exactly how I wanted and even went above and beyond what I expected. So for one, it works wirelessly, so I assume similar to Sidecar on the iPad. I hope there's a way to do it wired as well if you don't want to do it over Wi-Fi and have some of that AirPlay compression. But basically, Apple says through Belkin they're going to sell accessories that let your iPhone attach to your MacBook lid very easily, and then it will use the ultra-wide lens on your iPhone to bring center stage to any Mac you want, even MacBook Pros which don't have center stage. So it'll track around with you, and there's new stage lighting effects and that kind of thing. And on top of that, they introduced this mode where it will literally capture your desktop below. I don't even know how they're doing this with the image signal processor, but essentially you can show off your desktop from what looks like a top-down field of view, and that same lens will also be capturing your face and tracking around with you using the center stage feature simultaneously. It was mind-blowing how it looked in the demo. It may not be as cool in person, but I was really impressed by it, especially how the display of the iPhone just doesn't even turn on. Like, it just knows. You just gotta bring your phone nearby your Mac, put it on the back, and boom, now it's a camera option on FaceTime calls. And hopefully it lets me do that for OBS live streaming as well. Because yes, I would love to live stream with my iPhone's camera, but still have all of the OBS settings that I have on my Mac. That would be great. It feels like they're directly listening to my request, which I'm sure I wasn't the only one asking for it, but it just makes a ton of sense, and I hope that it works as seamlessly as they make it look. They redesigned system preferences in macOS Ventura as well, but the biggest new multitasking change probably has to come from, the biggest new change has to come from Stage Manager, where they kind of clump a bunch of windows together and you can kind of grab them from the side as needed, and they'll kind of remember the layout as you grab them. I didn't find it looking particularly productive or very useful for most Mac workflows. I'll try it when it comes out, but I think where Stage Manager makes a bigger difference is iPadOS. So yeah, there's a lot of collaboration and multitasking features they're building into macOS Ventura, but most of them are pretty forgettable in my opinion. So yeah, I'm already talking about iPadOS for a second because this is what people have been asking to be addressed for years, and last year was kind of the final straw for me. I was like, this is where iPadOS needs to be the main focus, and it wasn't, so I didn't have high expectations going into this. And I'll admit, the iPadOS 16 changes were better than I was anticipating because, for one, we finally got a weather app. There's so much rich data and information. They could have brought this last year. I have no clue why it took them a year to add this, but yeah, you finally can check the weather on the iPad. Still no calculator. We're literally going to be going into 2023 with no calculator app on the iPad that launched in 2010. That's still crazy to me, but okay, we got the weather app and this whole stage manager feature where you have multiple windows that you can kind of rearrange and switch between is being brought to iPadOS, and you can truly take full advantage of it when plugging it into an external monitor. So this is definitely much better external monitor support than what we had before, which was basically screen mirroring. Now you can actually boot into what kind of looks like macOS. It's just heavily watered down version of macOS because it's just windows kind of overlapping each other. But here's the crazy thing. All of these options we're talking about between Stage Manager and revamped external monitor support, as well as text scaling. So that used to just be a feature on Mac so that you could fit more information on the screen. Now you can kind of do that with iPads as well, but all this new stuff is pretty much only available to the M1 iPads. So the funny thing about that to me is I've been suggesting for a while now that there should be software exclusives to the higher end iPads, right? Like if the iPad has Mac Silicon, you should be able to give that Final Cut, give that Logic or Xcode. You know, Pro apps can come to the devices that can handle them. It's okay if they don't run on all of the older iPads with weaker CPUs and stuff. That's not a problem. Does software exclusive restrict that? And so many people said, no, Apple doesn't want to software restrict features. They want to make sure it's accessible to all. They wouldn't add things that just the pros can have and not the rest. And yet here they are doing exactly what you guys said they wouldn't do. They're bringing pro features to just M1 iPads. In fact, outside of the weather app and the Stage Manager stuff, there's really not that many other noteworthy changes with iPadOS. The more disappointing thing, which is kind of a repeat of last year, iOS 16 got these amazing redesigned lock screen changes. None of that is coming to the iPad, which has a bigger screen. You would think you could add more widgets to that lock screen or rearrange more things, but no, it's just the same lock screen as last time. So I guess we gotta wait another year for the iPad to get something that the iPhone already has. And most iPads are not rocking the M1 chip, so I guess you got your, improved focus modes and, you got your live sports notifications and that kind of thing, some Apple Maps updates and iMessage updates, things that affect the Apple ecosystem as a whole. But that's what I kind of noticed during the iPadOS section of this keynote, is that they were kind of announcing things that were already available on other devices to try to make it sound like this is an update for the iPad, when in reality, it's just keeping the ecosystem symmetrical, across devices. So again, I don't think iPadOS 16 really addressed anyone's main concern with the iPad, usually being that it can't do what a Mac can, and that's just because of software restrictions, like it can't run the apps I want it to, and it doesn't have proper external monitor support. Now it kind of does, but again, you're still just kind of running iPad apps in a window on an external monitor, which is, again, better than it was before. So I'm impressed that they addressed it in that regard, but the fact that it's only available on M1 makes it kind of hard to get excited for, and I don't think anyone who was not comfortable with buying an iPad for a Mac replacement is suddenly going to be more comfortable with it now. But correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. If there's some of you out there that are like, oh, I'm convinced I can do all of my working off of an iPad now thanks to iPadOS 16, I'm gonna go buy one. First off, you might want to wait till October because there's likely going to be an M2 equipped iPad by then, but let me know what exactly has changed that can make you justify it. Is it just that instead of screen mirroring, it's now, resizable windows that fill up the entire external monitor, or what exactly has swayed you? They've improved the Files app and added a lot of things to Mac, and they've said now that third-party apps can take up 16 gigs of RAM running, which before they couldn't do, so it's good to see that feature unlocked. Very few iPads actually have 16 gigs of RAM in the first place, but I feel like we're already at this point now where Apple is comfortable adding certain software features to the higher-end end iPads and not giving those features to the lower end iPads. So sorry, end of the day, I'm still just gonna say you should offer macOS as a dual boot option. You're basically there, Apple. You're practically doing it already. The second Craig plugged in this USB-C cable to the Pro Display and it basically booted up into a very macOS style look, I was like, come on, you're halfway there. Just do a full-on dual boot option that would fix like 90% of people's complaints with the iPad, and you could easily justify charging $2,000, $3,000 for it because now it can do everything a Mac can do. And more because it has Face ID, 5G, Apple Pencil support, and all that. I like the concept of using the iPad as a canvas that you can write on and do some really intensive drawing on, and then transition over to the big screen, and it can be powered by the iPad, and you're doing more intensive video editing on that, you know? Even if you want to restrict the macOS dual boot to just when you're plugged into a monitor, because then there's no battery life argument to worry about. It's got power, and there's no the touchscreen doesn't work argument because it's an external monitor. It doesn't have a touchscreen. So funny enough, they didn't actually talk about tvOS at all. There was not really any mention of it, and that's fine in my opinion because I didn't really have a high list of things I wanted for tvOS, and I don't own an Apple TV anymore, so I'm perfectly content with it not taking up stage time, but I apologize to the people who wanted tvOS updates. Overall, the event exceeded my expectations, which were just for software, and I'm very happy with the look and style of a lot of iOS 16. macOS Ventura doesn't seem like a huge update apart from the camera stuff for me, so that's mostly what I'm going to be looking for in the betas. I'll be diving more into all of these subjects throughout the course of this week, so stay tuned. We've got podcasts, live streams, and more videos coming throughout the week for Dub coverage. Let me know your favorite part. What were you most disappointed by? For me, it was probably still iPadOS. I'm on iPadOS 16. Guess what? Still no optimized battery charging, still no battery health. Nothing. All that good stuff. Let me know what you're thinking down in the comments below. This is your Apple Sheep here. I'll see you all in the next one.